What happens when the man you gave up everything for throws you away like garbage? For Amelia Vance, this wasn't a nightmare. It was her reality. Her ex-husband Mark, a man dripping in designer suits and cruel intentions, stood in her dingy workplace, a smirk playing on his lips. He glanced at her stained apron, at her tired eyes, and laughed. "Still playing the starving artist, Amelia. I did you a favor. You were dead weight." He thought he'd left her with nothing but debts and shattered dreams. He was wrong. He left her with a fire. He had no idea that in the shadows a man worth billions was watching, and he wasn't just about to change her life. He was about to claim her right in front of the very man who tried to destroy her. This is the story of how a forgotten wife became a millionaire's bride. The scent of burnt coffee and bleach was the perfume of Amelia Vance's new life. It clung to her clothes, her hair, and settled deep into the lines of exhaustion under her eyes. Her world, once filled with the aroma of oil paints and turpentine in her sunlit studio, had shrunk to the four corners of the daily grind, a bustling but bleak downtown cafe. Here her artistic hands, which once coaxed life onto canvases, were now chapped and red from scalding water and harsh cleaning chemicals. Just 2 years ago she had been Mrs. Mark Vance, wife of the rising star in corporate finance. Their life had been a curated masterpiece of cocktail parties, charity galas, and weekend trips to the Hamptons. Amelia had been the perfect accessory, the graceful, cultured wife who charmed his clients and decorated their sprawling colonial home with impeccable taste. She had placed her own promising art career on a velvet-lined shelf, believing in his dream, in their dream. She'd managed their social calendar, raised their daughter Lily, and poured every ounce of her creative energy into building a perfect life for him. The cracks when they appeared were hairline at first. The late nights he blamed on work, the scent of a different perfume on his suit jacket, the cold indifference that replaced his once adoring gaze. Then the cracks shattered their life completely. He'd announced he was leaving her over a cold dinner of takeout sushi. There was someone else, Tiffany, a 24-year-old marketing intern at his firm with a surgically perfected face and an ambition that mirrored his own. The divorce was a brutal, systematic dismantling of her existence. Mark, with his team of ruthless lawyers, painted her as an unstable, financially irresponsible artist who had contributed nothing to his success. He argued that her hobby was a drain on their finances. The home she had lovingly decorated was sold. The joint accounts were emptied. The judge, swayed by Mark's polished performance and documentation of his sole financial contributions, awarded Amelia a pittance. She was left with a mountain of legal debt, a few boxes of personal belongings, and their 5-year-old daughter Lily, for whom she had to fight tooth and nail just to get primary custody. Now their home was a cramped one-bedroom apartment above a noisy laundromat. The living room doubled as Amelia's studio and Lily's playroom. A single mattress on the floor served as Amelia's bed, tucked into a corner. Lily had the bedroom, a tiny sanctuary Amelia tried to fill with fairy lights and colorful drawings to mask the peeling paint and rattling window frame. Every dollar was a battle. A trip to the grocery store was a complex mathematical equation of coupons and generic brands. A fever from Lily could mean a devastating choice between medicine and the electricity bill. Yet in the quiet moments after Lily was asleep, Amelia would find solace. She would pull out a worn sketchbook and a piece of charcoal. Her fingers, stiff from washing dishes, would slowly rediscover their old grace. She drew Lily's sleeping face, the pattern of the water stains on their ceiling, the exhausted faces of her fellow commuters on the bus. Her art was no longer about beautiful landscapes or abstract concepts. It was about survival, resilience, and the raw, aching beauty she found in the struggle. It was her secret act of rebellion against the life that had been forced upon her. Her co-worker at the cafe, a kind, no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Clara, was her only confidant. "You've got a light in you, honey," Clara said one afternoon, watching Amelia sketch on a napkin during a lull. "Don't let that man or this place put it out." Amelia offered a weak smile. "This light doesn't pay the rent, Clara." "Not yet, it doesn't," Clara replied, wiping down the counter. Not yet. One rainy Tuesday, Amelia was running late for her shift. She'd been up all night with Lily, who had a nasty cough. She hadn't had time to eat, and her cheap sneakers were soaked through. As she rushed behind the counter, her manager, a perpetually stressed man named Mr. Henderson, pointed a thumb toward a table in the corner. "Table 4 wants a word with you, Vance. And hurry it up." Amelia's heart sank. A complaint was the last thing she needed. She smoothed down her stained apron, took a deep breath, and walked over, preparing her apology. But it wasn't an angry customer. It was Mark. He sat there looking completely out of place in his tailored $1,000 suit. Opposite him, clinging to his arm, was Tiffany, dressed in a vibrant red dress that probably cost more than Amelia's monthly rent. They looked like they had just stepped out of a magazine, a glossy ad for a life Amelia no longer had access to. Mark's eyes roamed over her, a slow, deliberate appraisal designed to humiliate. He took in her faded uniform, her messy bun, the dark circles under her eyes. A cruel, satisfied smirk spread across his face. "Well, well," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Look what we have here. Amelia Vance, the celebrated artist, serving coffee. Life come at you fast, didn't it?" Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. The clatter of cutlery and the low hum of conversation in the cafe seemed to fade into a dull roar in her ears. For a moment she was frozen, a deer caught in the blinding headlights of her past. Mark's presence was a physical violation, a trespass into the small, fragile world she was trying to build. Tiffany giggled, a high-pitched tinkling sound that grated on Amelia's nerves. She looked Amelia up and down with a pitying expression that was somehow more insulting than outright contempt. "Oh, Mark, be nice," she cooed, squeezing his arm. "She's working. It's admirable." The word hung in the air, dripping with condescension. Amelia's training kicked in a pathetic shield against the onslaught. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice tight and barely a whisper. Mark leaned back, stretching luxuriously. "Oh, we're not here to order. We were just in the neighborhood closing a deal, a big one, and I thought I'd see how you were doing. Looks like you're doing just great." His gaze swept the sticky tables and the cracked linoleum floor. "Really landed on your feet." Each word was a carefully aimed dart. He was performing, using her as a prop to demonstrate his own success to his new partner. He was showing Tiffany the before, so she could better appreciate her after. "I'm fine, Mark," Amelia said, her eyes fixed on a point just over his shoulder. She could feel the stares of other customers. Mr. Henderson was watching from behind the counter, his arms crossed. "Fine," Mark chuckled. "Honey, you look like you haven't slept in a week. And what's that smell, bleach? It's a far cry from your Chanel No. 5. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial hiss. "I told you, Amelia, that art nonsense was a pipe dream. You should have listened to me. You had a good life, a comfortable life. You just weren't grateful enough." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He had been the one to have the affair. He had been the one to walk away. He had systematically stripped her of every comfort, and now he was blaming her for her own hardship. The mention of her art was the cruelest cut. It was the part of her soul she had shared with him, the part he now stomped on with his expensive leather shoes. A spark of her old fire ignited in her chest. "My art was never the problem, Mark," she said, her voice finding a sliver of strength. "And I am grateful. I'm grateful for my daughter. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful I no longer have to pretend to admire a man with no integrity." Mark's smirk faltered for a second, replaced by a flash of anger. He wasn't used to her talking back. Tiffany, however, saw her opening. "Lily," she said, tasting the name as if it were an exotic fruit. "How is the poor thing? It must be so hard for her living." "Like this." She gestured vaguely at the cafe. "Mark and I are looking at a new penthouse. It has a dedicated playroom with a view of the park. We'd love to have her over sometime, show her what she's missing." The threat was clear, a veiled custody jab. "We can give her a better life than you can." The fire in Amelia's chest blazed into a protective inferno. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. Before she could say something she might regret, a calm, deep voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Amelia turned. Standing beside her table was a man she had noticed a few times before. He was a regular, usually sitting in the back corner with a laptop, always polite but quiet. He was tall and well-built, dressed in a simple dark sweater and jeans, the kind of expensive, understated clothing that screamed wealth more loudly than any designer logo. He had sharp, intelligent eyes and a quiet intensity about him. Mark eyed the man with disdain. "This is a private conversation. Mind your own business." The man didn't look at Mark. His gaze was on Amelia, a question in his eyes. "Ma'am, is this person bothering you?" The simple act of being seen, of being offered help, was almost enough to make her crumble. She swallowed hard and nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. That was all the man needed. He turned his full attention to Mark. His quiet demeanor transformed, carrying an unmistakable aura of authority. "You heard her. It's a private conversation she no longer wishes to be a part of. I suggest you and your guest leave." Mark bristled, his ego pricked. "And who the hell are you, her new boyfriend?" "Picking them up at the coffee shop now, are we? Amelia Classy." The stranger didn't rise to the bait. He simply held Mark's gaze. There was a chilling stillness about him, a promise of consequences that made Mark's blustering seem childish. "I'm a customer who wants to enjoy his coffee in peace, and your voice is beginning to bother me. Leave. Now." For a long moment a standoff ensued. Mark, used to being the most powerful man in any room, was visibly flustered by this stranger's unshakable confidence. He looked from the man to Amelia and back again. Finally, with a scoff, he pushed his chair back. "Fine. I've seen all I need to see anyway." He sneered at Amelia. "Don't come crying to me when you can't make rent. My offer to take Lily full-time still stands, for her sake." He grabbed Tiffany's hand and stormed out of the cafe, the little bell on the door jangling furiously in his wake. The cafe was silent for a beat before the normal chatter resumed. Amelia stood there, trembling, mortification and anger warring within her. She turned to the stranger, her face flushed. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You didn't have to do that." He gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile. "No one deserves to be spoken to like that." "My name is Julian." He extended a hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Amelia. Amelia." He repeated, his eyes drifting for a moment to a small framed sketch hanging on the wall behind the counter. A charcoal drawing of rain-streaked city streets she'd put up to make the place feel a little more like her own. His gaze returned to her. "It's a pleasure to meet you properly." He released her hand, picked up his coffee cup from his table, and gave her a slight nod before heading for the door. As he left, Amelia was left with a profound sense of confusion, gratitude, and an unsettling feeling that this was not just a random act of kindness. There was something more in Julian's eyes, a flicker of recognition that she couldn't quite place. The humiliation of the encounter with Mark clung to Amelia like a shroud for days. His words echoed in her mind during the quiet hours of the night, fueling her insecurities. Dead weight, starving artist. I did you a favor. Was he right? Had she thrown away a life of comfort for a dream that was destined to fail? She looked at her daughter, sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling, and the doubt turned to fierce resolve. She wouldn't let Mark's venom poison Lily's future. She channeled her anger and hurt into the one place she could control, her art. She started staying up even later after her exhausting shifts, sketching with a feverish intensity. She filled pages with the emotions she couldn't speak aloud, the shame of the cafe, the fury at Mark's arrogance, the fierce lioness-like love for her daughter. Her work took on a new depth, a raw, emotional honesty that had been missing from her more polished pieces from her previous life. A week after the incident, Julian returned to the cafe. Amelia's heart did a nervous little flip when she saw him walk in. He didn't sit at his usual table in the back. Instead, he came straight to the counter. "Amelia," he said, his voice as calm and steady as she remembered. "I was hoping I'd find you here." "Hi, Julian," she said, wiping her clammy hands on her apron. "Can I get you your usual—" "Actually, I'm here for another reason." He hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I've been admiring your sketch on the wall for weeks." He nodded toward the charcoal drawing of the rainy street. "It's evocative. It captures a feeling, not just a scene." "Did you do it?" Amelia was taken aback. People rarely noticed the drawing, let alone commented on it. Yes, I did. It's just a little something." "It's more than a little something," he insisted gently. "I looked you up. Amelia Vance. Your early work, the landscapes from the Harrison Gallery show 5 years ago. It was good. Technically brilliant. But this," he gestured to the sketch again. "This has a soul. It's better." Amelia was speechless. He had researched her. He remembered a gallery show from half a decade ago, from a lifetime ago. He saw the evolution in her work, the very thing she had been pouring her pain into. "I own a commercial real estate development company," Julian continued, getting to his point. "We've just finished renovating a historic building downtown, the old Argent Tower. We've dedicated the main lobby as a rotating art space for emerging local artists. The first exhibition is in a month, and the artist we had scheduled just pulled out." He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. "I want you to be the artist, Amelia. I want to feature your new work. We'll cover all the costs, framing, lighting, catering for the opening night. We'll handle the press. All you have to do is create." The world tilted on its axis. It was an impossible offer, a life raft thrown to her in the middle of a stormy sea. Doubt immediately crept in. This was too good to be true. Why, she asked, the word coming out as a choked whisper. "Why me?" "Because talent like yours shouldn't be hiding in a coffee shop," he said simply. "It deserves to be seen." He handed her a sleek black business card. "Julian Thorne, CEO, Sterling Properties." The name of the company was vaguely familiar, but Amelia was too overwhelmed to place it. "Think about it," he said. "My assistant Elena will call you tomorrow to discuss the details if you're interested. I hope you are." With another small smile, he turned and left, leaving Amelia staring at the card, her mind reeling. Sterling Properties. The Argent Tower. It sounded impossibly grand. Could she do it? Could she produce enough quality work in just 1 month while juggling her job and Lily? The fear was immense, but it was eclipsed by a thrilling, terrifying flicker of hope. This was a chance, not just to make money, but to reclaim her name, her identity. To show Mark, to show the world, and most importantly, to show herself that she was not dead weight. She was an artist. That night she didn't sleep. Fueled by coffee and adrenaline, she spread a large canvas on the living room floor. She mixed her paints, the familiar, comforting smell filling her small apartment. And she began to paint. She painted the exhaustion of her fellow commuters on the 6 a.m. bus, their faces illuminated by the cold light of their phones. She painted the defiant joy of Lily splashing in a puddle. She painted the loneliness of her own reflection in the cafe window late at night. She poured all her pain, her anger, her love, and her fragile hope onto the canvas. For the first time in years, she felt truly, completely alive. The next day, Elena, Julian's assistant, called. She was professional, efficient, and incredibly kind. A contract was couriered over. The terms were beyond generous, a significant advance that would allow her to quit her job at the cafe immediately, a budget for materials that made her gasp, and a commission structure on any pieces sold that was heavily in her favor. It was real. Amelia walked into the daily grind 2 hours later. She found Mr. Henderson berating a new barista for frothing milk incorrectly. She took a deep breath, walked up to him, and handed him her apron. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I quit." For the next 4 weeks, Amelia worked like a woman possessed. She rented a small, dedicated studio space with her advance, a luxury that felt like a palace. Clara from the cafe would often bring her coffee and watch Lily for a few hours, marveling at the canvases that were piling up. Julian was a constant, quiet presence. He never interfered with her creative process, but he would stop by the studio once a week, ostensibly to check on the progress for the exhibition. They would talk for hours, not just about art, but about life, about dreams lost and found. She learned that he was self-made, that he'd built his empire from nothing, and that he valued authenticity and hard work above all else. He was thoughtful, perceptive, and he listened to her in a way no one ever had. He saw her Amelia not an accessory or a problem to be solved. A fragile, tentative friendship began to bloom, a bond forged in mutual respect. She found herself looking forward to his visits, to the sound of his calm voice, and the way his eyes would light up when he looked at her work. The night of the gallery opening arrived. The lobby of the Argent Tower had been transformed. Her paintings were hung on vast white walls, illuminated by professional lighting. They looked powerful, important. A sophisticated crowd of art critics, investors, and city socialites milled about, sipping champagne and speaking in hushed, appreciative tones. Amelia stood in a simple black dress, the first new piece of clothing she'd bought in years, her heart pounding against her ribs. This was it, the culmination of her gamble. Julian found her by her centerpiece, a large, emotionally charged portrait of a mother and child looking out a rain-streaked window. "You did it, Amelia," he said, his voice soft with pride. "They're breathtaking." "Thank you, Julian," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything. You have no idea what this means to me." "I think I do," he replied, his gaze warm. Just then the crowd near the entrance parted. Amelia's blood ran cold. Standing there, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, was Mark, and beside him, looking utterly stunned, was Tiffany. They had clearly come expecting a pathetic, amateurish display. What they found was a triumph. Mark's face cycled through a series of emotions: shock, confusion, and finally a deep, simmering rage. He couldn't reconcile the woman in the elegant black dress, the toast of this glamorous event, with the humiliated waitress in the stained apron he had mocked just a month ago. He scanned the room, his eyes wide, taking in the massive, powerful paintings, the well-heeled guests, and the sheer scale of the exhibition. This wasn't a hobby. This was a professional coup. Tiffany, for her part, looked like a fish out of water. Her flashy, skin-tight dress seemed garish and cheap under the sophisticated gallery lighting. She tugged at Mark's sleeve, whispering furiously, but he ignored her, his eyes locked on Amelia. He began striding towards her, a storm cloud of resentment gathering on his brow. Julian, sensing the impending confrontation, subtly moved to stand slightly in front of Amelia, a protective gesture that was both discreet and unmistakable. "What is this, Amelia?" Mark demanded when he reached them, his voice a low growl. "What kind of game are you playing?" Amelia lifted her chin, the fear that he once inspired in her now replaced by a calm, steady resolve. "It's not a game, Mark. It's my art exhibition." "Your exhibition," he scoffed, gesturing around the opulent lobby. "Don't be ridiculous. You couldn't afford to rent a closet for a night, let alone this. Who are you sleeping with to pay for all this?" His eyes flickered contemptuously toward Julian. Before Amelia could respond, Julian stepped forward. He extended a hand to Mark, his expression perfectly neutral. "Mark Vance, I presume." "Of Vance. Financial." Julian said, his voice smooth as silk but with an undercurrent of steel. "We haven't been formally introduced. I'm Julian Thorne." The name hit Mark like a physical blow. His jaw went slack and the color drained from his face. Julian Thorne. The Julian Thorne. CEO of Sterling Properties and, more importantly, the head of Sterling Innovations, the venture capital firm Mark had been desperately trying to court for months. Vance Financial was on shaky ground, and a partnership with Sterling was the lifeline his company desperately needed. He had been buttering up Thorne's junior executives, sending gift baskets and pulling every string he could just to get a 10-minute meeting. And here he was, standing in front of the man himself, having just insulted the woman on his arm. Mr. Thorne." Mark stammered, his arrogance instantly evaporating, replaced by a desperate, fawning panic. He shot a frantic look at Amelia, the pieces clicking into place in his mind in the most horrifying way possible. I had no idea. This is your event. It is. Julian confirmed, his voice dropping a few degrees colder. Sterling Properties is proud to sponsor Ms. Vance's inaugural solo exhibition. We believe she is one of the most significant emerging talents in the city. Her work has integrity, depth, and a powerful voice. Qualities I find to be in short supply these days. Every word was a perfectly aimed shot at Mark's character. Julian's gaze never left Mark's, and in that moment Mark understood. This wasn't just business. It was personal. Tiffany, oblivious to the corporate power play unfolding, tried to salvage the situation. "Mark, honey, isn't this wonderful for Amelia?" she said with a painfully fake smile. "We're so proud of you." Amelia simply looked at her, and for the first time she felt nothing but pity for the young woman who had attached herself to such a hollow man. Mark, scrambling now, tried to change tactics. "Amelia. My God, why didn't you tell me? I always knew you had it in you. I always supported your art, didn't I, baby?" The sudden shift from tormentor to cheerleader was so jarring it was almost comical. I was just joking with you at the cafe, just trying to motivate you. You know, tough love." The assembled guests, who had been trying to politely ignore the scene, were now listening with rapt attention. The pathetic desperation in Mark's voice was impossible to miss. Amelia looked him dead in the eye. The years of being belittled, of being made to feel small and worthless, coalesced into a single moment of crystalline clarity. "No, Mark," she said, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "You told me my art was a pipe dream. You told me I was dead weight. You stood in my workplace and tried to humiliate me in front of my colleagues. There was no love in it, just cruelty." She then turned to Julian, a genuine radiant smile transforming her face. "But I should thank you. Your cruelty was the motivation I needed. It lit a fire under me that I thought had gone out a long time ago." Julian's expression softened as he looked at her, a deep, undisguised admiration in his eyes. He gently placed a hand on the small of her back. "The fire was always there, Amelia. You just needed the right space to let it burn." He then turned his attention back to the pale, sweating Mark. "Mr. Vance," Julian said, his voice now crisp and dismissive, "my team has been reviewing your firm's proposal. After this display, I can tell you with certainty that Sterling Innovations will not be entering into a partnership with a man of your character. We value integrity as much as we value profit. You, it seems, have neither. Now I believe you were just leaving." It was a public execution. Mark stood there, utterly destroyed, the architect of his own ruin. The hushed whispers of the crowd were like the rustling of his career's obituary. Without another word, he turned, grabbed a stunned Tiffany by the arm, and practically fled from the gallery, his power and prestige dissolving with every step. As the doors swung shut behind him, a spontaneous applause broke out in the room. It started with Clara, who had come to support her, and quickly spread. People weren't just clapping for the art, they were clapping for her victory. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, not of sadness or pain, but of profound, overwhelming relief. Julian turned to her, his hands gently framing her face. He wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "This is your night, Amelia Vance," he whispered, his voice for her alone. "The first of many." And in that moment, surrounded by her soul laid bare on canvases, under the warm and steady gaze of the man who had seen her when she felt invisible, Amelia knew he was right. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The aftermath of the exhibition was a whirlwind. Mark's public humiliation at the hands of Julian Thorne became the talk of the town's financial and social circles. News of his failed bid for the Sterling partnership spread like wildfire, causing his investors to panic. His company, already on unstable footing, began to crumble. Within weeks, Vance Financial was facing a catastrophic collapse. Mark, the man who defined his worth by his wealth and status, was losing both at an astonishing rate. Amelia, conversely, was skyrocketing. Her exhibition was a critical and commercial success. A glowing review in the city's most prestigious art journal hailed her as A powerful new voice painting the beautiful, brutal truths of modern survival. Collectors clamored for her work. By the end of the week, every single piece from the show had sold, earning her a sum of money that was truly life-altering. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. The first thing she did was move. She found a beautiful, light-filled 2-bedroom apartment in a safe, quiet neighborhood with a good school for Lily. One of the bedrooms became her dedicated studio, a real one with vast windows overlooking a park. Watching Lily run around her own spacious room squealing with delight was a joy so pure it brought tears to Amelia's eyes. She paid off her legal debts, bought a reliable car, and set up a college fund for her daughter. She had built a fortress of security for them brick by brick with her own 2 hands and her own talent. Her relationship with Julian deepened, evolving naturally from friendship and mutual respect into a slow-burning, tender romance. He was unlike any man she had ever known. He was patient, kind, and deeply supportive of her career. He celebrated her successes as if they were his own and provided a quiet, steady presence on days when the pressure felt overwhelming. Their dates weren't extravagant displays of wealth, but intimate moments of connection. They'd spend hours in museums discussing the nuances of a Rembrandt or a Rothko. They'd take Lily to the park on Sundays, Julian pushing her on the swings with a genuine smile on his face. He fell in love not just with Amelia, but with her small, fierce family. Lily, who had been cautious and shy since the divorce, adored him. She would crawl into his lap with a picture book, and he would read to her with a gentle patience that melted Amelia's heart. One crisp autumn evening, about 3 months after the exhibition, Julian took Amelia to the construction site of his latest project. It was a towering skyscraper that was still just a steel skeleton against the twilight sky. They took a construction elevator to the top floor, the wind whipping around them. The view was spectacular, a glittering tapestry of city lights stretching to the horizon. "It's beautiful," Amelia breathed, clutching his arm. "I wanted to show you something," Julian said, leading her to a specific corner of the unfinished floor. He pointed downwards. "From right here you can see the cafe where you used to work. And over there that's the courthouse where your divorce was finalized. And that little speck of light, that's the park near your old apartment." He turned to face her, his hands finding hers. "I wanted you to see it all from up here, Amelia, to see how small it all looks from a new perspective. You've risen so far above it." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. He understood. He saw the whole arc of her journey, the pain and the triumph. "I didn't do it alone," she said softly. "You gave me the chance, Julian. You saw me when I thought I was invisible. I saw an incredible artist and an even more incredible woman." He replied, his voice earnest. "I just opened a door. You were the one who had the courage to walk through it and build a whole new world on the other side." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Amelia's heart stopped. "I know it's fast," he began, his usual confidence replaced by a touching vulnerability. "But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I don't want to be the man who just opens doors for you, Amelia. I want to be the man who walks through them with you for the rest of our lives. I want to build a family with you and Lily. I want to wake up to your smile every morning and be the man who deserves the love of a woman as strong and brilliant as you." He opened the box. Inside was a stunning, elegantly understated diamond ring. Its simple, clean lines reminded her of his own character, strong, classic, and without pretense. "Amelia Vance," he said, his eyes searching hers in the fading light. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to speak. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes, Julian. 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. He drew her into his arms, and they kissed high above the city that had witnessed her fall and her extraordinary rise. The ghosts of her past were now just distant lights in a city that lay at her feet, a city where she was finally home. News of Amelia and Julian's engagement made quiet ripples through the circles they now inhabited. It was a testament to their private nature that it wasn't a splashy media announcement, but a happy truth shared with close friends and family. For Amelia, it was the final, beautiful brushstroke on the new canvas of her life. She was commissioning new works, planning her wedding, and most importantly enjoying the simple, profound joy of a stable, loving home with Lily and Julian. But the past, as it often does, had one last card to play. One afternoon, Amelia received a registered letter. It was from Mark's lawyer. Her heart seized with a familiar dread, but as she read, dread turned to disbelief. Mark was suing her. He was petitioning the court for a new settlement, claiming that she had hidden significant earning potential during their divorce proceedings. He argued that her recent success was proof that she had maliciously misrepresented her financial situation and that he was therefore entitled to a substantial portion of her art sales and a reduction in his child support payments, which she knew he had often paid late anyway. It was ludicrous, a desperate, pathetic money grab from a drowning man. Julian's lawyers assured her it was an open and shut case that would be laughed out of court, but the violation of it stung. Mark was trying to claim ownership of her triumph to taint her success by framing it as a deception against him. The court date was set. Julian insisted on coming with her. His hand a warm, steady presence on her back as they walked up the courthouse steps, the same steps she had walked down 2 years prior, feeling utterly broken and alone. Mark was already there, standing with his lawyer. He looked terrible. His expensive suit hung on a frame that was thinner and more stooped. His face was sallow, his eyes holding a haunted, desperate look. The swagger was gone, replaced by the sour stench of failure. Tiffany was nowhere in sight. Amelia had heard through the grapevine that she had left him as soon as the money started to dry up. When he saw Amelia looking poised and radiant in a sharp, well-tailored dress with Julian Thorne by her side, a flash of the old bitter resentment sparked in his eyes. They sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, a sterile, wood-paneled room that held so many painful memories for Amelia. Mark's lawyer began spinning a wild tale of Amelia's deceit, painting her as a cunning schemer who had plotted her success in secret to spite her ex-husband. When it was her lawyer's turn, she was calm and methodical. She presented evidence of Amelia's financial struggles, post-divorce, the termination notices, the low-wage pay stubs from the cafe, the bank statements showing a balance that often hovered near zero. Then the judge asked Amelia if she wished to make a statement. She hadn't planned to, but looking at Mark's bitter face, she knew she needed to. She stood, her voice not loud but clear and unwavering, filling the silent courtroom. "Your Honor," she began 2 years ago, "I left this courthouse with nothing but a box of personal belongings and a broken heart. My ex-husband, a man I had supported for over a decade, made sure of that. He called my passion, my art, a hobby and a drain on finances. He told me, and I quote, that I was dead weight he was glad to be rid of." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. She could see Mark flinch. "The success I have today was not hidden. It did not exist then. It was born in a cold one-bedroom apartment while my daughter slept. It was created with charcoal-stained fingers after 10-hour shifts washing dishes. It was fueled by desperation and a mother's promise to her child that things would get better. It was born from the ashes of the life this man burned to the ground." She then turned her gaze directly to Mark. For the first time, there was no fear, no pain, just a profound and final sense of closure. "You say you are entitled to a piece of my success. My success was built on every cruel word you ever said to me. It was built on every night I stayed up worrying about the rent while you were out buying champagne for your mistress. It was built in spite of you, not because of you. You are not entitled to my success. You are not entitled to my money. You are not entitled to one more second of my life." She finished and sat down, her heart pounding but her conscience clear. Julian reached over and squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with pride. The judge, a stern-faced woman who had seen it all, looked at Mark with an expression of utter disdain. She took no more than a minute to deliberate. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice sharp as glass, "not only is this petition denied, but I find it to be frivolous, vindictive, and an abuse of the court's time. I am ordering you to pay for Ms. Vance's entire legal fees for this matter." Furthermore, I will be launching a review of your compliance with the existing child support order. This court does not take kindly to parents who use their children as pawns in their bitter games. We are adjourned." The gavel fell with a sharp crack, a definitive final sound. It was over. Truly over. Mark sat there utterly defeated, his face ashen. He had lost everything. His company, his mistress, his reputation, and now this final pathetic attempt to claw something back from the woman he had so carelessly discarded. Amelia and Julian stood up and walked out of the courtroom, not looking back. As they stepped out into the bright sunshine, Amelia took a deep breath of the fresh, clean air. She was free. The last chain linking her to her old life had been broken. Ahead of her was only the light, her future, her family, and a canvas waiting for the next beautiful chapter. A year trickled by each day, a gentle brushstroke adding color and light to the canvas of Amelia's new life. On a perfect June afternoon, when the sun hung in the sky like a dollop of golden paint, she stood before a full-length mirror in a quiet room of Julian's country estate. The woman looking back at her was almost a stranger. The haunted, exhausted shadows that once lived beneath her eyes were gone, replaced by a serene confidence. Her hair, once perpetually tied back in a messy, functional bun, now fell in soft waves over the shoulders of a simple, exquisitely cut wedding gown. Lily, a vision in a simple white dress with a wreath of daisies in her hair, came and wrapped her arms around Amelia's legs. "You look like a queen, Mommy." Amelia knelt and cupped her daughter's face, her heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. "You know what?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Today I finally feel like one." She thought of the woman in the stained apron reeking of bleach and defeat, and sent a silent wave of gratitude to her past self for not giving up. There was no grand cathedral, no pomp or circumstance. Her aisle was a path mown through a field of wildflowers buzzing with the contented hum of bees. At the end of it, standing under the ancient sprawling branches of a majestic oak tree, was Julian. As she walked toward him, the breeze catching her veil, she saw the look on his face, not just of a man watching his bride approach, but of a partner witnessing a triumph he had the privilege to share. It was a look of profound respect, of boundless admiration, of a love that was a quiet, steady anchor in a world that had once been a raging storm. Their vows were not filled with flowery, archaic promises. They were a conversation, a pledge exchanged between equals. He promised to always champion her talent, to be the steady rock upon which she could build her dreams. She promised to always honor his integrity, to be the partner who would challenge and inspire him. They spoke of building a home, not just a house, and of raising Lily in a fortress of love and security. When they kissed, it was not the closing of a fairy tale, but the opening of a real and beautiful life. The reception was a joyful, sun-drenched affair. Laughter mingled with the sounds of a string quartet as their closest friends and family celebrated with them. Amelia watched as Julian lifted Lily into the air, her squeals of delight echoing through the fields. She found Clara by the champagne table, her old friend's eyes shining with tears. "Look at you, honey," Clara said, squeezing Amelia's hand. "I always knew that fire in you was too strong to be put out. I just never imagined it would burn this brightly." "I couldn't have kept the flame alive without you, Clara," Amelia replied, pulling her into a fierce hug. As twilight began to blanket the landscape in hues of lavender and rose, Julian took her hand. "There's one more thing," he said, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. He led her away from the music and laughter across a small stone bridge to a part of the property she hadn't seen before. There, nestled in a grove of birch trees, was a stunning modern building made of glass and warm cedar. It seemed to glow from within as the last rays of sunlight struck it. It was both a part of the landscape and a masterpiece of design. "Julian, what is this?" Amelia breathed, her steps slowing as they approached. "A workspace," he said, simply pushing open the large glass doors. The air inside smelled of fresh wood, canvas, and possibility. It was the most magnificent art studio she could have ever imagined. A towering wall of glass faced north, flooding the room with the perfect indirect light that painters dream of, Canvases of every size were neatly stacked against one wall. An entire shelving system was filled with paints, brushes, and supplies of the highest quality. In the center of the vast polished concrete floor stood a single state-of-the-art easel. Amelia walked slowly through the space, running her hand along a pristine workbench. She thought of her old studio, the corner of a cramped living room, her supplies stored in a shoebox, the constant fear of Lily knocking over a jar of turpentine. This space, this gift, was such a profound testament to how well he knew her, how deeply he understood what she needed not just to live, but to thrive. On the easel there was no canvas. Instead, there was a single framed document. She stepped closer to read it. It was the deed. The studio and the acre of land it stood on was hers. The name on the document was Amelia Vance Thorne. A queen needs her own domain, Julian said softly, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. A place that is entirely, completely yours, no matter what. Tears of pure, unadulterated joy streamed down Amelia's face. She leaned back against his solid warmth, looking out at the world through the glass wall of her sanctuary. This was not the act of a millionaire claiming his bride. This was the act of a man honoring his wife, the artist. He hadn't bought her a cage, however gilded. He had built her a pair of wings. She was home. Amelia's story isn't just about going from rags to riches. It's a powerful reminder that your worth is never determined by someone else's opinion of you. It's not defined by your bank account, your job, or your relationship status. Her ex-husband thought he could break her by taking everything away, but he couldn't take her talent, her spirit, or her resilience. She found strength not in a man who rescued her, but in a man who saw the strength that was already there. She turned her greatest pain into her most beautiful masterpiece. So many of us have faced moments where we felt worthless or forgotten. We've all had someone try to dim our light. If Amelia's journey from a heartbroken waitress to a celebrated artist and a cherished bride touched your heart, please let us know in the comments. Share a time you overcame a challenge that made you stronger. Your story could be the inspiration someone else needs to hear today. And of course, if you enjoyed this story, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing it with someone who needs a dose of hope, and subscribing to our channel for more real-life stories that will move and inspire you. Thank you for listening.
At the most exclusive charity ball of the year, one man made a fatal mistake. He thought his ex-wife was a ghost from a past he'd successfully buried under a mountain of social media posts and public adoration for his new influencer fiancée. He paraded his new life like a trophy, intending to rub her face in what she'd lost. But he failed to notice the quiet, unassuming man by her side. He didn't realize that while he was busy trying to own the room for a night, her date was about to own the entire building. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story about the deafening silence of true power in a world obsessed with empty noise. Sophia Hayes considered the invitation for the third time. The thick, cream-colored cardstock felt heavy in her hands, its embossed silver lettering shimmering under the warm light of her small, meticulously organized apartment. The annual Phoenix Ball for Children's Aid, the Serafina Grand Hotel. It was the event of the season, a place to see and be seen, a glittering constellation of old money, new tech, and the carefully curated fame of the digital age. It was also the last place on earth she wanted to be. 2 years ago, a place like the Serafina was her natural habitat. She had navigated these shark-infested waters with a practiced grace, not as Sophia Hayes, but as Mrs. Leo Vance. She had been the silent partner, the steady hand, the behind-the-scenes strategist who had helped build Leo's boutique marketing firm from a 2-person operation in a cramped office into the Vance lifestyle brand. She'd managed the finances, edited the proposals, and smoothed over the egos of clients he'd nearly alienated with his burgeoning arrogance. She had been the foundation upon which he built his shiny, fragile empire. And then came Skylar Monroe. Skylar wasn't just a person. She was a phenomenon, a cascade of professionally lit selfies, aspirational quotes pasted over stock photos of sunsets, and day-in-the-life vlogs that were as authentic as a $3 bill. With 50 million followers hanging on her every sponsored post, she was the human embodiment of the world Leo desperately wanted to conquer. He hadn't just left Sophia for Skylar, he had publicly rebranded his entire life, erasing Sophia's contributions, as if they were a draft of a post he'd decided not to publish. The divorce had been brutal, not financially, but emotionally. Leo had used his marketing savvy to paint a public narrative he was the dynamic innovator held back by a quiet, unambitious wife. Now, with Skylar, he was finally unleashed. Their Instagram was a fire hose of performative happiness, private jets to Monaco, front row seats at Paris Fashion Week, and a nauseatingly detailed account of their whirlwind romance culminating in a beachside proposal captured by a drone. Their hashtag #SkyleoLimit was trending weekly. Sophia, in contrast, had chosen quiet dignity. She took a modest settlement enough to be comfortable, not enough to be idle, and started a small, bespoke business restoring antique books and documents. It was work that required patience, precision, and a love for things with history and substance. It was everything her former life was not. Her joy was now found in the scent of old paper and leather, the delicate process of mending a torn page, the quiet satisfaction of bringing something beautiful back from the brink of decay. Her phone buzzed. It was her best friend, Maya. "Don't you dare tell me you've already turned it into a bookmark." Maya's text read, followed by a string of champagne bottle emojis. Sophia smiled faintly. "Still contemplating using it for kindling," she typed back. "No, you are going. I've already seen the posts. Skylar is wearing a custom Valdrin Sahiti gown. She's promised a royal entrance. And you cannot let them have the entire stage. You need to go and just exist. Beautifully. Unbothered. Unbothered. It felt like an impossible state of being. Every time a friend sympathetically mentioned seeing Leo and Skylar in a magazine or on a gossip site, the wound felt fresh. It wasn't that she wanted him back. God, no. It was the sting of being so thoroughly and publicly discarded. She was the inconvenient first chapter they'd ripped out of the book. "I don't have a dress," Sophia replied, a weak excuse. "I'll be over in an hour. We're going shopping. Not for a battle dress. For an I've already won dress," Maya shot back. Later that week, feeling a strange mix of dread and resolve, Sophia found herself in a high-end boutique she would have never entered on her own. Maya was a force of nature, pulling gowns from racks with a determined gleam in her eye. Sophia felt awkward and out of place, a sepia photograph in a technicolor world. "No, not that," Maya would say, dismissing a sequined number. "Too loud. You're not competing with a parrot. You're a swan." Finally, Maya pulled out a dress of deep midnight blue silk. It was deceptively simple, a classic A-line cut, with a modest neckline and a low back. It didn't scream for attention. It didn't have feathers or 1,000 crystals. But when Sophia put it on, it felt like a second skin. It flowed, it whispered. It commanded a quiet, potent elegance. It was the physical embodiment of the woman she was trying to become. "That's the one," Maya said, her voice soft with conviction. "When you walk into that ballroom, you won't be Leo Vance's ex-wife. You'll just be Sophia, and that will be more than enough." Sophia looked at her reflection. She saw the hint of dark circles under her eyes, the lingering sadness in their depths. But she also saw a flicker of something else, a spark of defiance, a woman who had survived the fire and was still standing. Maybe Maya was right. It wasn't about winning a battle with Leo. It was about showing up for herself. She bought the dress. She still wasn't sure if she had a date or if she even wanted one. Going alone felt both terrifying and empowering. But as she walked out of the store, the invitation in her purse no longer felt like a summons to her own execution. It felt like a dare. 3 days before the Phoenix Ball, the universe intervened in the form of a spilled cappuccino. Sophia had sought refuge in her favorite sanctuary, the Gilded Page, a small independent bookstore and cafe in a quieter part of the city. It smelled of roasted coffee beans and aging paper, a combination she found deeply comforting. She was at a small table in the back, hunched over a fragile 19th century copy of Moby Dick, a recent acquisition for a client. Her tools were laid out with surgical precision, archival tape, powdered eraser, a bone folder. She was so engrossed in her delicate work that she didn't notice the man approaching her table until he was almost upon it. He was tall and dressed in a way that defied easy categorization. He wore a simple grey cashmere sweater, dark jeans, and well-worn leather boots, clothes that suggested quality and comfort, not a desire to impress. His hair was a little unruly, and he had the thoughtful, slightly tired eyes of someone who spent more time thinking than talking. He was trying to navigate the narrow aisle between her table and a shelf of poetry when a college student with a massive backpack swiveled abruptly. The student's bag caught the man's arm, sending the large cappuccino he was holding arcing through the air. Sophia reacted on pure instinct. With a speed that surprised even herself, she swept her arm over her table, shielding the antique book as the hot, milky coffee splattered across her forearm and the wooden surface. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," the student stammered, horrified. "I'm so sorry," the man said simultaneously, his voice a calm, low baritone. He ignored the coffee seeping into his own sweater and immediately focused on her. "Are you all right? Did you get burned?" He grabbed a handful of napkins from a dispenser and with a surprising gentleness began to carefully dab at her arm, his movements efficient and concerned. "I'm fine," Sophia said, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline. "Thank you. The book. Is it okay?" She carefully inspected the volume. It was untouched, safe under the protective sleeve she always used. A wave of relief washed over her. The student, flustered and apologetic, practically fled the scene. The man, however, remained. "Let me buy you another coffee, and perhaps a pastry to compensate for the assault." He offered a small wry smile. "My name is Alexander." "Sophia," she replied, finding herself smiling back. "And you don't have to. It was an accident." "I insist." "Besides," he said, gesturing to the now empty poetry shelf aisle, "you saved me from having to pretend I understood Rilke. You've done me a great service." They ended up sharing a table. He insisted on buying her a new coffee and a croissant, and to her surprise, the conversation flowed effortlessly. He asked about the book, and his interest was genuine. He didn't just nod along. He asked intelligent questions about the binding, the paper, the history of the edition. She found herself explaining the art of restoration with a passion she usually reserved for her work. In return, he spoke about his own work in vague but intriguing terms, mentioning systems architecture and efficiency modeling. He talked about a love for building things that were elegant, durable, and functional from the ground up. He sounded more like a master craftsman than a businessman, and Sophia found it captivating. There was no posturing, no name-dropping, no subtle attempts to gauge her net worth or social standing. He was just interested in her. It's rare to meet someone who creates and preserves things of substance in a world obsessed with the ephemeral. He remarked, his gaze thoughtful, as he looked at her hands, which still had a faint smudge of graphite on them. That one sentence resonated with Sophia more than any compliment she had received in years. He saw her. Not the ex-wife, not the socialite, but the restorer, the preserver of stories. They talked for nearly 2 hours until the afternoon sun began to fade. As they prepared to leave, an idea both bold and terrifying sparked in Sophia's mind. It was Maya's voice in her head urging her on. Exist. Beautifully, unbothered. "This is going to sound incredibly forward," she began, her cheeks flushing slightly. "But I have an invitation to a charity event on Saturday, the Phoenix Ball. I was planning on going alone, but..." She trailed off, suddenly losing her nerve. Alexander didn't miss a beat. His expression didn't change, but a warmth entered his eyes. "I would be honored to accompany you, Sophia," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "On one condition." "What's that?" "That you tell me the story of the first book you ever fell in love with." And just like that, she had a date. A kind, intelligent, grounded man who seemed utterly unimpressed by the glitz and glamour the ball represented. As she walked home, a genuine, unforced smile graced her lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. She had no idea who Alexander really was. She just knew that for the first time, she was actually looking forward to the gala. She wasn't going to prove a point to Leo. She was going with a man who appreciated substance in a world of surfaces. The Serafina Grand Hotel was not merely a building, it was a statement. A century-old bastion of opulence. Its marble floors gleamed under the weight of colossal crystal chandeliers, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with wealth and influence. On the night of the Phoenix Ball, this effect was magnified 100-fold. Women in gowns that cost more than cars, dripped with diamonds, and men in bespoke tuxedos conducted business with hushed, confident tones. Sophia felt a familiar pang of anxiety as their car pulled up, but it was different this time. It wasn't the crushing insecurity Leo used to cultivate in her. It was the healthy nervousness of stepping back into a world she had left behind, but on her own terms. Alexander, seated beside her, seemed completely unperturbed. He had arrived at her apartment in a classic, impeccably tailored tuxedo, but his demeanor was the same as it had been in the coffee shop, calm, attentive, and focused entirely on her. "You look breathtaking, Sophia," he said, his voice a quiet anchor in the sea of noise and flashing cameras at the entrance. He helped her from the car, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. Her midnight blue dress, once a source of apprehension, now felt like armor. It didn't shout, but it held its own. As they walked up the grand staircase, a ripple of recognition went through the crowd, but it wasn't for her. Whispers followed them. Heads turned. Sophia initially assumed they were staring at her, the disgraced ex-wife making a surprise appearance. Then she realized all eyes were on Alexander. The city's power brokers, the tech titans, the stern-faced matriarchs of old families, they were all looking at him, some with awe, some with deference, some with undisguised envy. A portly man in a too-tight tuxedo practically tripped over himself to greet them. "Mr. Sterling, what an unexpected honor. We weren't aware you'd be gracing us with your presence tonight." Sterling. The name clicked in Sophia's mind. Not just Alexander Sterling, the founder and CEO of Ethereum Dynamics, the reclusive tech billionaire who had revolutionized data security. He was a legend, a ghost in the machine of modern commerce, famously private and rarely photographed. He was the kind of man Leo Vance pretended to be in his wildest dreams. Sophia felt a dizzying wave of shock. This was the man who had debated the merits of vellum with her over a croissant. He saw the question in her eyes. "We can leave if this is too much," he murmured, his voice for her ears only. "My apologies. I value my privacy. I should have been more forthright." "No," Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. She took a deep breath. "No, it's all right. I'm glad you're here with me." And she meant it. His identity changed the context, but not the man himself. His presence was no longer just comforting. It was a fortress. They had just acquired their champagne when the real show began. The press cameras at the entrance flashed with a renewed frenzy, and a wave of sound washed over the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, arriving now, Mr. Leo Vance and his fiancée, the incredible Skylar Monroe." The event host boomed over the microphone. Leo and Skylar made their entrance not as guests, but as a spectacle. He was preening in a velvet tuxedo, a smug grin plastered on his face. Skylar was a vision in her silver Valdrin Sahiti gown, which seemed to be composed more of light and crystals than fabric. It was a magnificent dress, but on her it felt like a costume. She posed, she pouted, she blew kisses to the cameras that followed her every move, her personal vlogger trailing her like a pilot fish. They held court in the center of the room, air-kissing acquaintances and soaking in the adoration. It was only a matter of time before Leo spotted her. His eyes scanned the room, sweeping over faces, and then they locked on Sophia. His smug smile tightened. He saw her dress, her quiet elegance, and then his eyes landed on the man beside her. He didn't recognize Alexander. To Leo, he was just some anonymous man in a tux, a placeholder. Perfect. This was the narrative he wanted. His ex-wife, trying desperately to keep up, had brought some no-name date to the biggest event of the year. With Skylar in tow, he strode towards them, a predator closing in. Well, Leo began, his voice oozing condescension. Sophia, I'm surprised to see you out. I thought you'd be at home with your books. The last word was laced with pity. Hello, Leo, Sophia said, her voice even. Her hand found Alexander's, and he gave it a reassuring squeeze. And this must be your +1, Leo said, barely glancing at Alexander before turning his full dismissive attention back to Sophia. I want you to meet my fiancée, Skylar Monroe. He presented her as if unveiling a masterpiece. You've probably seen her work. She's a true force in the digital space. Skylar gave Sophia a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Oh, hi, she cooed, her eyes doing a quick, critical scan of Sophia's dress and simple jewelry. That's a lovely dress. So classic. The unspoken addendum, old boring safe, hung in the air between them. It's so brave of you to come tonight. All of this must be a little overwhelming. The performance was for her vlogger's camera, which was now pointed directly at them, capturing every nuance of the carefully orchestrated humiliation. Sophia refused to take the bait. It's a beautiful event for a worthy cause, she said calmly. It's good to see it so well attended. Leo laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. Always so diplomatic. Some things never change. He then turned to Alexander, finally, deigning to acknowledge him. So, what do you do, pal? Let me guess. Accountant, lawyer? He was trying to place him in a box to categorize and dismiss him. Before Alexander could answer, the event host was back on the microphone. And now we'd like to present this year's Visionary Philanthropist Award to a man who has redefined the landscape of modern lifestyle branding, Mr. Leo Vance. A smattering of polite applause turned more enthusiastic as Leo's supporters cheered. He beamed, squeezed Skylar's hand, and shot a final triumphant look at Sophia. Duty calls, he said. Enjoy the party. From the sidelines. He walked toward the stage, the spotlight following him. Sophia watched him go, the sting of his words sharp and familiar. It was one thing to be discarded, another to be so publicly and cruelly reminded of it. Alexander's hand was still holding hers, a silent, solid presence. She looked up at him and saw that the calm, thoughtful expression on his face had been replaced by something else, a quiet, glacial stillness. He wasn't angry, he was observing, calculating. And in that moment, Sophia had the distinct feeling that Leo Vance had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Leo stood on the stage, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlight, feeling invincible. He held the crystal award in his hand, a tangible symbol of his success. Skylar watched him from the front table, her phone held high, recording his moment of glory for her millions of followers. Thank you. Thank you. Leo began, his voice resonating with practiced confidence. They call this the Visionary Award, and it truly takes vision to build something from nothing. It takes drive, it takes passion, and most importantly, it takes having the right partner by your side. Someone who inspires you, who pushes you to be better, who sees the future and runs towards it with you. He paused, locking eyes with Skylar. To my incredible fiancée Skylar, this is as much yours as it is mine. You are my inspiration. The crowd applauded. In the background, Sophia stood motionless. Every word was a carefully crafted erasure of her own history. The late nights, the sacrifices, the belief she had poured into him, all of it deleted. She felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't anger anymore. It was a profound, hollow sadness. Alexander watched her face. He saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, the way she held herself perfectly still to keep from shattering. He had seen enough. While Leo continued his speech, boasting about his brand's influence and his unprecedented growth, Alexander discreetly took out his phone. His movements were minimal, almost unnoticeable in the dim light. He typed a short, simple message to a single contact, Robert. Initiate the Serafina acquisition. Use the discretionary fund. I'm on site. Confirm when complete. He put the phone away. That was all. No dramatic pronouncements, no raised voice, just a quiet command sent out into the digital ether. Leo finished his speech to another round of applause and practically floated back to his table, high on his own rhetoric. He caught Sophia's eye again and gave her a pitying smirk. He then turned to the general manager of the Serafina, a man named Mr. Dubois, who had rushed over to congratulate him. Mr. Vance, a spectacular speech, Dubois gushed. Truly, the hotel is honored to host your triumph. Of course, Dubois, Leo said, waving a dismissive hand. It's the premier venue in the city. Where else would I be? We bring a certain prestige, don't we? He leaned in conspiratorially. Make sure my fiancée's champagne glass stays full. On the house, of course, for the publicity. Of course, Mr. Vance. Anything you need. It was this small yet telling exchange that solidified Alexander's decision. It wasn't just the personal insult to Sophia. It was the cheap arrogance, the casual disrespect for the people and the place that served him. Leo didn't see a historic hotel. He saw a backdrop for his Instagram. Alexander gently touched Sophia's arm. Would you care for a walk on the terrace? He asked, his voice low. She nodded, grateful for the excuse to escape the suffocating atmosphere. They stepped out into the cool night air. The terrace overlooked the city, a breathtaking panorama of glittering lights. For a few minutes they stood in silence. I'm sorry, Alexander, Sophia said finally. You didn't sign up for all that. I signed up to spend an evening with you, Sophia, he replied, turning to face her. Nothing that happened in there changes that. His words have no power unless you give it to them. Before she could respond, a harried-looking Mr. Dubois burst onto the terrace, his face pale and beaded with sweat. He wasn't looking at Sophia. He was staring at Alexander with an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. Behind him, a woman in a headset. The event coordinator was whispering frantically into her microphone. Mr. Sterling? Dubois stammered, his sycophantic demeanor toward Leo completely gone, replaced by trembling deference. Forgive me, I just received a call from the ownership group, from your people. Alexander simply raised an eyebrow, waiting. There seems to have been a transaction, Dubois said, his voice barely a whisper. A rather significant one, effective immediately. He swallowed hard. Welcome, sir, to your hotel. Sophia froze. She looked from Dubois's terrified face to Alexander's calm one. The city lights swam before her eyes. Your hotel? Alexander gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Thank you, Mr. Dubois. I trust my ownership will not be a problem. No, sir, not at all. An honor, a supreme honor. Good. Alexander said, his voice still quiet, yet it now carried the weight of absolute authority. First, please extend my compliments to the chef. The meal has been excellent. Second, please inform the bar staff that all drinks for the remainder of the evening are on me. It's a celebration. Yes, Mr. Sterling. At once. And Mr. Dubois? Alexander added, his voice dropping slightly. There is one other thing. Anything, sir. Alexander's eyes flickered for a moment towards the ballroom, where Leo was laughing loudly, holding his award up for another photo. It has come to my attention that one of your guests, a Mr. Vance believes his presence here grants him special privileges. He seems to be under the impression that he owns the room. A look of pure dread dawned on Dubois' face. I'd like you to correct that misunderstanding for me. Alexander continued, his tone smooth as silk. Discreetly, of course. Please present him with his final bill for the evening. Everything. His table, his guests' meals, the champagne he so generously offered on the house. And please add a 20% gratuity for the staff he has been treating so poorly. My staff? Dubois looked as if he might faint. Right away, Mr. Sterling. Right away. He practically ran from the terrace. Sophia stared at Alexander, utterly speechless. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. The scale of it. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't made a scene. He had simply bought the building. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Leo. Mr. Dubois, flanked by two stern-looking security guards, approached Leo's table. The vlogger's camera was still rolling, catching the moment. Dubois leaned in and spoke in a low, urgent tone. The smug grin on Leo's face vanished, replaced by confusion, then indignation, then sheer, stark panic, as a leather-bound billfolder was placed firmly on the table in front of him. What is this? Leo's voice was loud enough to carry. This is a mistake. My expenses are covered. There is no mistake, Mr. Vance, Dubois said, his voice now devoid of any warmth. The hotel is under new ownership, effective 10 minutes ago, and the new owner wishes to settle accounts. The words hung in the air. New ownership. Whispers erupted around the room. Who? How Skylar's perfectly made-up face was a mask of confusion. Her camera, still live-streaming, caught Leo's face, turning a blotchy red as he opened the bill. The amount was astronomical. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, looking wildly around the room. His eyes fell on the terrace doors where Sophia and Alexander were just stepping back inside. He saw the way Dubois kept glancing nervously in their direction. He saw the way the most powerful people in the room were now looking not at him but at Sophia's quiet, unassuming date. And in one horrifying, gut-wrenching moment of clarity, Leo Vance understood exactly what had just happened. The man he had dismissed as a +1 had just bought the entire goddamn hotel to settle a score. Skylar's livestream captured it all, Leo's face crumpling in humiliation. The frantic whispers, the collective turning of backs as the inter-social hierarchy of the room seismically realigned in real time. The spotlight that had so recently bathed him in glory now felt like an interrogation lamp exposing him for what he was, a small, loud man who had picked a fight with a giant. His influence, his prestige, his entire curated brand, it all evaporated in the face of one quiet, devastating transaction. The car ride away from the Serafina was silent, but it was a comfortable, contemplative silence. The city lights streaked past the window, a blur of gold and white. Sophia was still trying to process the tectonic shift she had just witnessed. It wasn't just about the money or the power or the spectacular downfall of her ex-husband. It was the way Alexander had done it. It was a checkmate delivered with the quiet precision of a grandmaster, not the boorish gloating of a street brawler. Are you okay? Alexander asked finally, his voice cutting gently through her thoughts. She turned to look at him. In the dim light of the car, he was just the man from the coffee shop again. Thoughtful, kind. I think so, she said, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. I've never seen anything like that in my life. He was disrespectful to you, Alexander stated simply, as if that explained everything. I have a low tolerance for bullies. You bought a hotel, Alexander. The words sounded absurd and wonderful at the same time. He gave a slight shrug, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. It was a sound investment. The property was undervalued, and the general manager clearly needed a lesson in priorities. He paused, his expression turning serious. But that's not what matters. What matters is that you never have to feel diminished by him again. His chapter is closed. And in that moment, Sophia knew it was true. The lingering hurt, the sting of his public erasure of her, it was gone. It hadn't been purged by revenge, but by the overwhelming evidence that she had moved on to something so much more real and substantial. Leo's world was a flimsy stage set. Alexander's was the bedrock beneath it. Her victory wasn't in Leo's defeat. Her victory was sitting right next to her. Meanwhile, the digital world was exploding. Skylar, in a moment of panic and flawed judgment, had kept the live stream going far too long. Millions of her followers had watched in real time the exact moment her fairy tale evening imploded. They saw the bill. They saw Leo's apoplectic, helpless face. They saw the pitying and scornful looks from the other guests. The clip was ripped, reposted, and went viral within the hour. The internet, once Leo and Skylar's kingdom, turned on them with merciless speed. The comments section of Skylar's page became a wasteland. OMG, he got owned by his ex-wife's new man. That look on his face when he realized the plus one was a billionaire. Sky is the limit, more like debt has no limit, LMAO. All that talk about being a visionary, and he couldn't even see who was standing right in front of him. This is the best thing I've ever seen. The way the new owner bought the whole hotel just to shut him up. Savage. Quiet savage. The hashtag Serafina Showdown trended worldwide. Memes were born. Leo's face of horrified realization was photoshopped onto everything, from crying cat pictures to stock market crash charts. Skylar's brand of manufactured perfection was shattered by a single brutal dose of reality. Her followers, who had bought into a fantasy, felt cheated. Their adoration curdled into ridicule. The next morning, the consequences bled from the digital world into the real one. The Vance lifestyle brand, which was built entirely on the perception of influence and success, began to crumble. A major athletic wear company that had just signed a seven-figure endorsement deal with Leo and Skylar called to indefinitely postpone the campaign launch. An investor in Leo's latest venture, a high-end men's grooming line, pulled his funding citing concerns about brand integrity. Leo's power had been an illusion, and Alexander had ripped the curtain away for the whole world to see. Sophia woke up to a flood of texts from Maya, mostly just keyboard smashes and links to Twitter threads. She read a few, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. There was no glee, no triumphant fist-pumping. There was only quiet. The noise that had surrounded Leo for years, the noise he had used to drown her out, had finally been silenced. Later that afternoon, her phone rang. It was Alexander. "I have a proposition for you," he said, his voice warm. "I've just acquired a first edition of Dante's Inferno with original Gustave Doré engravings. It's magnificent, but it has some slight water damage on the cover. It needs an expert, and I was hoping that expert might also be free for dinner tonight." Sophia smiled a real unburdened smile. She looked around her quiet apartment at the books, waiting patiently for her care at the life she had painstakingly rebuilt for herself. It was a good life, a substantive life. "I think," she said, her heart feeling light and full, "I can fit that into my schedule." Her new chapter wasn't about the downfall of her ex-husband or the wealth of her new companion. It was about her passion, her strength, her quiet victory. It was about a woman who had learned to find value, not in the noise of public approval, but in the beautiful, resilient substance of her own story. Weeks turned into a month. The digital shockwave of the Serafina Showdown had lasting repercussions. Skylar Monroe attempted a clumsy pivot. She posted a tearful black and white video titled "My Truth," where she spoke about the pressures of living a public life and the pain of seeing her relationship scrutinized. It was a valiant effort to reclaim the narrative, but her audience, now cynical, saw it as just another performance. Her engagement plummeted, and lucrative brand deals dried up, replaced by offers from detox teas and mobile games. Her relationship with Leo, built on the unstable ground of mutual brand enhancement, began to fracture under the weight of their shared public humiliation. Their once perfect Instagram feed became sporadic and strained. Leo Vance simply disappeared. He deactivated his social media, and the Vance lifestyle brand website was replaced with a simple under construction page. Rumors swirled that he was facing lawsuits from disgruntled investors and had sold his flashy downtown condo at a loss. He had built his identity on a pedestal of perceived success, and when it was kicked out from under him, he had nothing left to stand on. Sophia, by contrast, had never been more visible, yet she remained firmly out of the spotlight. Stories had run in business journals and high society pages about the mystery woman who captivated tech mogul Alexander Sterling. But she declined all interview requests. Her anonymity was her own, and she guarded it. Her business, however, flourished in the most unexpected way. A curator from the prestigious Morgan Library and Museum, who had been at the gala and was impressed by the quiet dignity with which she had handled the confrontation, reached out. He hadn't known about her connection to Alexander at the time. He had simply been told by a mutual acquaintance that she was the best rare book restorer in the field. He commissioned her for a major project, the restoration of a collection of hand-illustrated medieval manuscripts. It was the project of a lifetime work that demanded all her skill, passion, and expertise. Her success wasn't a byproduct of Alexander's wealth. It was the direct result of her own talent, a talent that was finally being recognized on its own merits. Her relationship with Alexander deepened far from the glare of paparazzi and the opulence of galas. They spent weekends at his understated country estate, not hosting lavish parties, but taking long walks in the woods, reading by the fire, and engaging in hours-long conversations about everything from astrophysics to the history of papermaking. He was fascinated by her mind and her quiet strength. She was drawn to his powerful intellect and the profound kindness that underpinned his every action. He never treated her like a conquest or a trophy. He treated her like a partner. He would often sit in her workshop for hours, simply watching her work, content in the shared silence. He once told her, "My world is about building the future, Sophia. It's all code and projections. You keep the past alive. You remind me that some things are meant to last." One crisp autumn afternoon, about 2 months after the gala, Sophia was walking through a park near her apartment. As she rounded a bend, she saw a solitary figure on a bench, staring blankly at the ducks on the pond. It was Leo. He looked diminished. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple jacket and jeans. The arrogant posture was gone, replaced by a weary slump. The charismatic energy had been extinguished, leaving behind a tired, defeated man. He didn't see her, and she had no desire to approach him. She didn't feel a surge of triumph. She didn't feel hatred or pity. She felt nothing at all. He was a stranger, a ghost from a story that was no longer hers to read. She simply continued her walk, the sun warm on her face, leaving him behind in the fading light. That evening, as she and Alexander were preparing a simple dinner together in her apartment kitchen, he handed her a small, beautifully wrapped box. "I believe this belongs to you," he said. Inside was the 19th century copy of Moby Dick from the coffee shop. But it was different. He had had it professionally rebound in the softest midnight blue leather to match the dress she had worn to the gala. On the inside cover, in elegant gold leaf, was a small, embossed whale. "A reminder," he said softly, "of the day you shielded something of substance from a storm." Sophia traced the outline of the whale with her finger, her heart full to bursting. She looked at Alexander, at the genuine love and respect in his eyes, and she knew. True wealth wasn't owning a hotel. True power wasn't commanding a room. True happiness wasn't a hashtag. It was this: the quiet moments, the shared understanding, the profound, unshakable knowledge that she was valued not for who she was with, but for exactly who she was. And that was a victory no one could ever take away. Nearly a year had passed since the night of the Phoenix Ball. The seasons had turned, and with them, the narratives of all their lives had settled into new, more permanent forms. The Serafina Showdown was now a piece of internet lore, a case study in branding classes on the perils of manufactured influence. For Sophia, however, it was a distant echo, a story about a woman she barely recognized anymore. Her life now was one of quiet rhythm and profound joy. The Morgan Library project had been a triumph, cementing her reputation as one of the preeminent restorers in her field. Her relationship with Alexander had blossomed into a true partnership, a seamless blend of their two worlds. They were the architect and the archivist, one building the future, the other preserving the past, finding their perfect equilibrium in the present. This particular Saturday found them at his country estate, a place of rugged stone-warm wood and vast windows that looked out onto rolling hills. It was a home, not a showpiece. Sophia was in the sun-drenched library, her fingers gently tracing the tooling on a 17th century atlas, while Alexander worked across from her, sketching on a large tablet. He wasn't designing a skyscraper or a new data center. He was designing a dream. "I have a question for you," he said, his stylus pausing mid-air. He turned the tablet towards her. On the screen was a breathtaking architectural rendering, a building of glass steel and reclaimed timber that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. It was modern, yet timeless. "This is the preliminary design for the Sterling Foundation's new central community hub. The city has already approved the land grant." "It's beautiful, Alexander," Sophia said, genuinely impressed. "It looks like a library, a museum, and a park all in one." "That's the idea," he confirmed. "But it's missing a heart, a soul. My board wants a standard digital resource center. Efficient, clean, sterile. I think that's a profound failure of imagination." He zoomed in on a large wing of the building. "This section here, I envision it as the living archive, a place dedicated not just to storing physical media books, manuscripts, photographs, films, but to celebrating them. A place with restoration labs visible to the public workshops for bookbinding and calligraphy, soundproofed rooms for listening to vinyl records. A place that teaches new generations that our history is tangible, that you can hold it in your hands." He looked at her, his expression earnest. "It's a massive undertaking. It needs a director who doesn't just understand preservation, but who believes in it with their entire being. Someone with the vision to build the collection, design the exhibits, and lead the entire division. It needs you, Sophia." Sophia felt the air leave her lungs. This wasn't a casual offer or a pet project for the billionaire's girlfriend. This was a serious, demanding, public-facing role. It was everything she had once shied away from. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. To be a public figure, not for her association with a man, but for her own knowledge and passion. "Alexander, I'm a restorer. I work in quiet rooms on one page at a time." She said, the old hesitation, a faint whisper. "And now you can build the rooms," he countered gently. "You can inspire 1,000 others to care for those pages. This isn't about being in the spotlight. It's about building the lighthouse. Don't you see it's the culmination of everything you are?" He was right. It was the natural next step, the ultimate expression of her life's work. It was a chance to build something permanent. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and firm. "Yes, I'll do it." The project, which they began calling The Hearth, moved quickly. As director of the archival wing, Sophia was tasked with acquiring foundational collections. She spent her days meeting with estate planners, collectors, and university librarians, building a library from the ground up. It was during this process that a ghost from her past reappeared, not with a bang, but with a quiet, desperate email. The email was sent to the Foundation's General Acquisitions address. It was from a private art consultant representing a Ms. S. Monroe, who was looking to sell a significant collection of 20th century fashion photography books, including several rare, signed first editions by masters like Richard Avedon and Helmut Newton. Sophia stared at the name, S. Monroe. It could only be one person. A quick, discreet inquiry by Alexander's team confirmed it. After her public fall from grace and her breakup with Leo Schuyler Monroe had been forced to liquidate her assets, the photography collection was one of her last valuable possessions. "We don't have to pursue it," Alexander told her that evening, his hand covering hers. "There are other collections." Sophia thought for a long moment. She remembered the empty performative woman at the gala. She remembered the vicious online comments and the brutal collapse of a life lived on social media. There was no sense of triumph in it anymore, only a grim sadness. "No," she said finally. "The collection itself is world-class. If the provenance is clean and the price is fair, the hearth should have it. I'll handle the meeting myself." The meeting was set for the following week at a neutral art gallery downtown. Sophia chose her outfit with care, a simple, professional grey dress, her hair tied back. She was not Sophia Hayes, the ex-wife, or Sophia Alexander Sterling's partner. She was Ms. Hayes, the director of the archival wing. She arrived first and was examining a painting when Schuyler walked in. The change was jarring. The glamorous, over-the-top influencer was gone. In her place was a young woman who looked her age for the first time. Her hair was its natural color, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no discernible makeup, and her clothes a plain black turtleneck, and jeans were neat but unremarkable. The biggest change was in her eyes. The confident, challenging gaze was gone, replaced by a deep, weary anxiety. She didn't recognize Sophia at first. She approached nervously, looking for the foundation representative. "Ms. Monroe," Sophia said, turning to face her. Schuyler stopped dead, recognition, confusion, and a wave of pure horror washed over her face. She looked like she was about to bolt. "You," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Hello, Schuyler," Sophia said calmly, extending a hand. "I'm Sophia Hayes. I'm the director overseeing acquisitions for the project. Please, let's sit." They moved to a small seating area. Schuyler sank into a chair, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She wouldn't meet Sophia's eyes. I didn't know it was you," Schuyler stammered. "My consultant just said it was a new foundation. I can go." "That isn't necessary," Sophia said, her tone gentle but professional. "I'm here to evaluate the collection. That's all. Tell me about it. Why did you collect these specific photographers?" The question seemed to catch Schuyler off guard. She had likely expected scorn or pity or a gloating lecture. She hadn't expected a professional inquiry. She hesitated, then began to speak, her voice shaky at first. My grandfather was a photographer, not a famous one. He just shot for local papers. But he loved Avedon. He had a print of Dovima with elephants hanging in his darkroom. He taught me about lighting, about composition. He said a great photo doesn't just show you a person, it tells you their entire story in a single frame. As she spoke, a flicker of genuine passion ignited in her eyes. She talked about Newton's provocative power, about Penn's elegant simplicity. She wasn't reciting talking points. She knew her subject. This collection wasn't just an asset she'd been given. It was something she actually understood and loved. Sophia realized with a jolt that buried deep beneath the vapid influencer was a person with a genuine interest, a story of her own that had been papered over by hashtags and sponsorships. "And Leo," Sophia asked softly, the only time she would mention his name. Schuyler flinched, but she answered. "He thought it was a good investment, something to make me seem sophisticated. He never opened a single one." A bitter, sad smile touched her lips. "He's in Singapore now, trying to launch some crypto consulting thing. He emails sometimes. It's like he doesn't even remember what happened. He's already rewritten the story in his head." It was a pathetic, fitting epitaph for the man who had tried to rewrite Sophia's story. He was a ghost, haunting his own failed narrative on the other side of the world. Sophia made her decision. The collection is magnificent, Skylar. It would be an honor to have it at the hearth. We'll pay the full asking price from the valuation. Tears welled in Skylar's eyes. Why are you doing this? She whispered. After everything, I was awful to you. I'm doing this because the books deserve to be seen, Sophia said, her voice full of a grace she didn't know she possessed, and because my grandfather loved books too. She stood up, offering her hand again. Good luck with whatever you choose to do next, Skylar. Skylar shook her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. Thank you, she said, and for the first time, it sounded real. Months later, the day of the groundbreaking ceremony for the hearth arrived. It was a bright, clear day. Sophia stood at a podium facing a crowd of city officials, donors, and community members. Alexander was in the front row, his eyes fixed on her, glowing with pride. She looked out at the crowd, unafraid. She was no longer a ghost at someone else's feast. This was her stage built on her terms. We stand here today at the beginning of a story, she began, her voice steady and clear, amplified in the open air. A story about building a bridge between the past and the future, between the silent wisdom held in the pages of a book and the infinite possibility of the digital frontier. In an age of fleeting images and disposable information, we are making a promise that our stories, our collective history, will not be erased, that they will have a home, a place of substance, a place to last. She finished her speech to thunderous applause. She walked down from the podium and took her place beside Alexander. Together they picked up 2 silver shovels and alongside the mayor plunged them into the rich, dark earth. As the cameras flashed, Sophia looked at Alexander, her partner, her friend, her love. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the pain, the quiet, rebuilding, the serendipitous meeting over a spilled coffee, the spectacular night that closed one chapter, and the beautiful, substantive life that had followed. She wasn't the woman who had been humiliated by her ex-husband anymore. She wasn't even the woman who had watched him fall. She was the woman who was now building a legacy, spadeful by spadeful, right here in the light. So what's the real takeaway from Sophia's incredible story? It's a powerful reminder that in a world that shouts true strength, often whispers. While her ex-husband chased the hollow echo of social media fame, Sophia quietly invested in herself, in her passion, and in her own worth. His empire was built on sand, ready to be washed away by the first tide of public opinion. Her foundation was built on the bedrock of authenticity and skill. The dramatic climax at the gala wasn't just about an ex-husband getting his comeuppance. It was about the universe spectacularly realigning to reward substance over surface. It proves that the most powerful currency isn't followers or fame, but self-respect. If Sophia's journey of quiet dignity and ultimate triumph resonated with you, show some love by hitting that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. And for more stories of justice, resilience, and the power of authenticity, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next.